All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Lots to get into today. Thank you guys so much for being here. The United Nations is meeting this week, and we have a lot of news rolling out by the minute from that meeting. And there's lots of different stuff to get into about all the different conflicts in the world. We're going to go through a couple of the latest breaking news items that have come out of this meeting of the United Nations and explain my thoughts on them and why there is a theme going on right now in this moment, and how we're addressing all of these foreign wars, whether it be Ukraine, which we'll get into, or Israel, Gaza, which we'll get into, and kind of the world stage as a whole. There is a theme that I constantly see being a recurring theme, and that is anything but America's interests. And by America, I don't mean the industrial base of America. I don't mean the Israel lobbyists in America. I don't mean the major warfare technology companies of America. I mean the actual American people, the people that make up this country and make up the voting base that elect our politicians. That is what I mean by America's interests. And many of the things that I've seen coming out of this conference this week have been directly anti-American in that sense. So we'll get into all this and more today on the Quest for Clarity podcast.
Americanism, not globalism.
I am not a slave. I am a free citizen.
There should be no Federal Reserve System.
Only America first.
End all of these wars. America is trying to play empire. We want everything released, and you're actively covering it up. It's not America first to be pushing our influence in areas where it shouldn't be. We're run by people that don't understand what they're doing and don't understand the ramifications of the policies they're enacting. That's an incredibly dangerous situation. All right, everybody, before we begin, if you wouldn't mind going right down below this video and hitting like and subscribe, I would really appreciate it. We're about 10 subscribers away right now from the 100 subscriber mark. So if you guys could please, everyone watching this video, please subscribe. That would help me out a lot, and maybe we could reach that goal very soon. Also, if you wouldn't mind going to my Instagram, X, and Spotify accounts and following all those pages over there, I would really appreciate it. But let's get right into the news. So the United Nations is meeting this week, as I said. We saw Donald Trump speaking yesterday. In his speech, he covered a lot of stuff. He covered some of the foreign conflicts of the world. He also covered the mass migration into Western countries, which is, of course, a big problem, and he's completely correct about that. How the fact that migration into these Western countries has completely toppled many of the institutions in these countries and many of the traditions in these countries, and have overwhelmed the systems of these nations, whether it be healthcare, whether it be the economy, whether it be the welfare systems, the schools. He's completely correct about that. But I'm actually not focused on much of that stuff because he is completely correct about that. I am more concerned with the foreign policy aspect of what was discussed in his speech, and also in multiple meetings that have happened between the United States officials like Rubio and other foreign leaders. So the first thing I do want to talk about today is the horrific imagery and optics of Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, someone who I've previously bashed on this show because I don't like him at all. And he met just today with, let me make sure I get the name right. It's Ahmad al-Sharar. He is one of the leaders in Syria. I believe the new leader in Syria, the guy who's taking control after they overthrew Bashar al-Assad just last December. And anyone who may not know, he is a former al-Qaeda member, and he was welcomed in with a royal welcome into New York City. An al-Qaeda member was welcomed into New York City with fanfare, got a gleeful handshake from our Secretary of State. And if you had told somebody about this 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, or even yesterday, this is something that's like not on the table. You know, we wouldn't twist ourselves into thinking that this is in our interests, that al-Qaeda takes control of an entire country, and that they are going to be welcomed in on a red carpet treatment into the United States, into New York City, and be involved in these lovely diplomatic talks with the United States. And let me be very clear. I'm not advocating for war. with these countries. I'm not advocating that we have hostile relations to these countries. I don't think, and call me crazy, that it's in the United States. I don't think we should be cheering. It shouldn't be our policy that we're cheering this on, that al-Qaeda now has control over Syria. But we are cheering that on. And you'll never guess why. Oh, that's right. It's because it's in Israel's interests that al-Qaeda take control of Syria. That's right. As it always seems to be, the constant theme is that we twist ourselves into pretzels to justify things that are seemingly unjustifiable from an American point of view because they are pro-Israel or promise to be nice to Israel and say they will have friendly relations with Israel. And that is the entire reason behind the United States' support now for al-Qaeda leadership in Syria. Not because that's in our interests, because just that sentence alone makes it clear that al-Qaeda leading an entire nation is not in our interests. For anyone who's a slight history nerd who's looked into this for 2 seconds knows that al-Qaeda was the group behind 9/11 and behind the death of thousands of Americans that day. But you're supposed to ignore that. Our leadership says that you should ignore that. You should forget about that, actually, because now that they are running the state next door to Israel, that is good because that's in Israel's interests. And America and Israel, as we all know, they're bound by the hip. And there is no daylight between us on anything, supposedly. And so you're supposed to forget about the death of all those thousands of Americans at the hands of al-Qaeda terrorists because, Israel's happy now, so everyone actually forget. Everyone adjusts their entire moral compass because Israel is okay with it, so therefore we should be okay with it. So that happened today, and that was just discussed. The photo of it, you can go look up the photo. They're laughing and chuckling and smiling and shaking hands. The United States Secretary of State shaking hands with a terrorist, with an al-Qaeda member that was part of the group at the time that they killed a couple thousand Americans. And we're doing this for Israel. So that's one thing. That was the first ridiculous thing to come out of today. Another thing is that we continue to isolate ourselves, sticking on the theme of Israel and the Middle East. The United Kingdom, France, Australia, Portugal, and Canada, just this week, all recognized a Palestinian state. Now, my position on this is not that it does so much good that they're recognizing a Palestinian state. And it's not my expectation that if we were to do the same, that things would drastically change. But it's not this recognition that is making a drastic change. Because right now there's no leadership, there's no government, there's no infrastructure to make that work at this point. But it is symbolic. It's more of a symbolic gesture of by these Western countries, these major Western countries, that the West as a whole, the Europeans, the Canadians, the Australians, are moving away from Israel. This is a major move. The world as a whole, this makes about 160 countries that recognize a Palestinian state. And we can look at that as more symbolic and not necessarily material, but more symbolic, that 160 countries in the world now are taking the Palestinian side in this conflict, essentially. Leaving the United States as pretty much, besides, I believe, Germany, the lone country the lone powerful country, the lone country with some sway that is backing the Israelis in this and their ongoing onslaught against the Palestinians. And this just isolates us in such an unnecessary way and has no material benefit for the American people, has no benefit to my life or your life. But we're told this grand fairy tale, this folk tale of how it is an eternal bond. I've gone over this a million times, but we're all propagandized and convinced, and we're just told that this relationship between the United States and Israel is a bond that can never be broken. We are two countries with no difference in foreign policy. We're two countries that have the exact same interests. And then we're told in response to that is that actually, no, they have different perspectives, they have different interests, and we would not, if our interest were to go away or if they were to separate at some point, we would then adjust accordingly and not go along with it. Except there's no example of that. So we can say it all we want, but if that were true, I don't think we would be supporting them like we are right now as they continue to kill close to 100,000 Palestinians, if not 100,000 Palestinians. So this continues the theme I was discussing earlier of anti-American foreign policy. This is anti-American because all this does is isolate us. We don't really, as much as we're told we get great intelligence back from Israel, we get great military technology back from Israel, we trade with Israel, we get all these great things supposedly with Israel that then we're told that is a justification for us backing them and sending them endless weapons and endless money to conduct their war in Gaza. Regardless of what we're told, that's not really true. We don't actually get intelligence that is essential and crucial to our survival from Israel. I know you've been told that. I know that's been the narrative. That's not actually true. In fact, Israel actually has a strange alliance with the Chinese. You should look this up. There has been past allegations of them passing off military technology and American intelligence to the Chinese. And for those who've been maybe living under a rock for the past couple years, the United States has a pretty negative posture towards the Chinese. We are actually gearing up to potentially defend Taiwan against a Chinese invasion in the coming years. So why would our greatest ally, the people that we profess to be so closely aligned with, be having secret under-the-table dealings with the Chinese, while the Americans are bending over backwards and betraying all of our other alliances, to do the bidding of Israel? Wouldn't we expect that Israel do the exact same thing in return? And then the common response to that is that they're their own country with their own interests, and they're going to act in their national interests. Like Ted Cruz said to Tucker Carlson, they spy on us, but so does every other country, and we spy on them, and it's not really a big deal. But actually, I do have higher standards for myself than that. I know Ted Cruz seems like he has a low bar for a friend. And let me be clear, I'm not saying that I have some naive view. I acknowledge they all spy on us. That doesn't mean it's right, though. That doesn't mean that we should be allowing the Israelis to spy on us. We shouldn't be allowing, like what was reported during Trump's first term, where there were supposedly tracking devices attached to presidential vehicles that they found, and was supposedly Israelis who put them there. If you go read Boris Johnson's book, Boris Johnson, the former prime minister of the UK, says that that Benjamin Netanyahu himself used his bathroom, Boris Johnson's private bathroom, and then when he came out, they found some tracking device and recording device in the bathroom of the prime minister's office. If we're adjusting our foreign policy so much to help this country out, the little country the size of New Jersey, would we expect that, they give us a lot in return, and we don't put up with them spying on us? We don't just take it as a given that they're going to take American intelligence and give it to our biggest adversary? Why do our politicians put up with it, you might ask? Why are they so happy to put up with it, actually? Ted Cruz said it like it was no big deal. Moving on, though, from the Middle East, and moving on from the ridiculousness of our American-Israeli foreign policy, we had another interesting development, actually, minutes before I started recording this episode, that has to do with Ukraine and Russia. Donald Trump at the United Nations met with Zelensky, apparently in some back room, and just after the meeting ended, this was minutes ago, Donald Trump put a Truth Social post out, and I'm going to read it in its entirety because it is a terrible post. He said, quote, "After getting to know and fully understand the Ukraine-Russia military and economic situation, and after seeing the economic trouble it is causing Russia, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win, all caps, all of Ukraine back in its original form. With time, patience, and the financial support of Europe, and in particular NATO, the original borders from where this war started is very much an option. Why not? Russia has been fighting aimlessly for 3.5 years, a war that should have taken a real military power less than a week to win. This is not distinguishing Russia. In fact, it is very much making them look like a quote-unquote paper tiger. When the people living in Moscow and the great cities, towns, and districts all throughout Russia find out what is really going on with this war, the fact that it's almost impossible for them to get gasoline through the long lines that are being formed, and all the other things that are taking place in their war economy, where most of their money is being spent on fighting Ukraine, which has a great spirit but only getting better. And only getting better, Ukraine would be able to take back their country in its original form and, maybe even go further than that. Putin and Russia are in big economic trouble, and this is the time for Ukraine to act. In any event, I wish both countries well. We will continue to supply weapons to NATO and for NATO to do what they want with them. Good luck to all. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. So it was fun. I laughed a little bit in the middle of that because he goes on about this war economy and how all their money is being spent on fighting Ukraine. It's a little ironic when we are actively spending a lot of our money fighting wars all across the world. So it's a little rich to hear from the President of the United States that Russia is spending all their money on war when that is our specialty. So that's a little bit funny, a little bit rich. But anyways, this is a significant shift in posture just minutes after meeting with Zelensky. This is my immediate reaction to this. This was minutes ago. And I'm not happy about this at all because for those who've been consistently watching the show, for those who've been following this war as it's gone on for a couple of years at this point, you know that the MAGA position on this, the conservatives, the general, not the neocons, but the general kind of position amongst conservatives, specifically younger conservatives and more libertarian-leaning people, is that this is not our war. We shouldn't have been involved in this at all, and we shouldn't have been involved in provoking it to the position in the way that we have for decades at this point. But we also, during the campaign specifically, made a massive point during Biden's regime that he and the Europeans and the globalists all were acting in this ridiculous posture that Ukraine had any chance of getting all their entire country back. As unfortunate as it is for the Ukrainian people, that's not a position that we as Americans can benefit from taking because it's just not reality. Now for the President of the United States, at this point in the war, where Ukraine, look it up, has almost nobody fighting on the front lines. They've almost run out of people to fight in the war. And for some reason, after a talk with Zelensky in some back room somewhere, has changed his entire position on this. This is not good. We can't, the idea that they're going to get, let me just tell everyone straight. The idea that Ukraine's going to get all their entire country back without direct military intervention from either the Europeans or NATO or America is psychotic. The idea that Ukraine alone is going to get all their territory back is not true. That's not reality. Now, if America and the Europeans were to chip in by actually having troops on the ground, or if NATO were to get involved in this somehow militarily, then that's another story. And then if it's a traditional war, there's a chance. But what the fear is, of course, that if America was to get involved in this, or if other nuclear-armed countries or NATO were to get involved in this, that could very quickly go to disaster through nuclear war. And also, I saw he put a Truth Social post out earlier, Donald Trump did, before this one, saying that any NATO country that Russia violates the airspace of should shoot down the plane. And now we have this, where we are taking the entire European Union NATO stance on this war that Ukraine's going to get all their land back. A statement that they wouldn't have even said for the last couple months because it's so delusional. And now we're advocating for the planes of Russia to be shot down if they cross a NATO country's border. And this is the position we're taking now on Truth Social. This is not good. This is not going in a good direction. Seems like it's escalating ever since that Russia-United States meeting. And I don't know where it goes from here because this is not what you want to see. We see escalation here. We see escalation in terms of the Israelis taking over Gaza and kicking out 500,000 people, they say. They say that 500,000 people have escaped Gaza City since they started invading. And things all around are not looking great for foreign policy. And this is the story of the United Nations at this point. We all meet, we all have these little backroom conversations, and suddenly the entire position on all these things change. Suddenly, the United States is allies with al-Qaeda, and we're cutting off the UK and France and Canada in exchange for the Israelis. And then also, We have one conversation with Zelensky for an hour, and suddenly we're very much in a position that Ukraine is going to get all their territory back. And we're actually going to invest a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of weapons, and a lot of money into making sure that can become reality. This is ridiculous. We need to stay consistent here. And what we need to do is be consistent. We need to say what we've been saying for years, because we were correct all these years. The idea of America first, as I see it, as many people see it, is that we prioritize the people of this country first. We don't prioritize Ukraine first. We don't prioritize the Europeans first. We don't prioritize the Israelis first. But our leaders, we have to now see this for what it is. Our leaders do not have the same priorities as us. They don't have us as their main priority in terms of foreign policy, at least. And we have to acknowledge that it's many of the Republicans, actually. During the Biden term, it was easy to pin it all on the Democrats, the globalist Democrats, the Democrats that prioritize the Ukrainians. They all put the Ukrainian and they put the Ukrainian flag in their bio. And it was very easy because they made it easy to target them. And then the Republicans used that as a launch pad to say that they were the non-interventionists in the campaign and then get our votes. Well, now, are we going to forget that this is what's going on now? Because now the Republicans are taking the exact same position the Democrats did. So we have to be aware of this, because now we're going to get into the midterms. And after having this situation now where we're taking the Democrats' position. We were against the Democrats bombing the Houthis, and now we're bombing the Houthis. We were against the Democrats funding this war in Ukraine seemingly endlessly. And now the Republicans that we voted in to do just the opposite are now doing just that. And now we are prioritizing countries like Israel over the interests of the American people, the very American people that are the relatives of those killed in 9/11. And we're doing so by now aligning with the very people who are behind 9/11 because it's in Israel's interests. I'm going to stay America first, for anyone who cares. I'm going to stay America first. I know there's plenty of people who are going to stay America first because that's what we were told. And that's what I came up on. I'm not going to betray everything that I came up on. I'm not going to betray the very values and principles that we were all told were correct. They are correct. And everyone out there who's thinking exactly what I'm thinking, you know that this is the case. If we are to have principles, if we're to stay consistent, we must be consistent in these situations as well. We have to deny this. We have to say this isn't the position that the conservatives are going to take. Because being conservative in the truest sense of the word isn't just fiscal policy. It's being conservative like a Ron Paul. Conservative all around. We aren't going to overextend ourselves. It's not our place to overextend ourselves. It's not our place to be the policeman of the world. We learned that back in Vietnam. We learned that in the Middle East after 9/11. By we, I mean people like me and you. Our leaders, they learned a different lesson. They learned how profitable this was. They learned how much campaign donations they can get by the interest groups that benefit off of this. So it's our job now. They learned their lesson of how much money they can make and how much power they can wield. It's our job now, as the American people on the other end of this, the people who are being harmed by these policies, it's our job now to learn as well. Take names. See who's voting for these spending bills, for these aid packages to Israel and Ukraine. Take names of the Republicans that claim to represent us, the ones that claim to be conservative. Take names of who is voting for what bill. Because the midterms are coming up in about a year. And they're going to be campaigning on trying to end the war in Ukraine, just like they did in 2024. They're going to say they want to end the war in Ukraine, and they're going to be at town halls trying to work to get the words together to be a non-interventionist on foreign policy. But if we have the receipts that they're lying, that's not true, then we'll be awake enough to see through their lies, because they are lies, and they're playing for a different game than the rest of us. We actually have principles. They have pocketbooks they're trying to fill. They have campaigns they're trying to get funding for. So we have to apply pressure, because that's our political power. We're the voters. We can apply pressure on these people to do what we want. And we have to wield all the power that we can, because that's all we can do. And that's where I think I'll end it off today. And everyone, please keep up on this. Keep up on the news. Do exactly what I was saying. Make sure that you know who is actually working for America and who is actually working for Israel and Ukraine. Who is actually working for the Europeans and NATO. And align yourself with the people that are working for America, because those are the actual representatives. And those are the real people. Those are the people who aren't working for the donors and aren't working for the military industrial complex and aren't working for foreign lobbies. So my message today, keep track of who's who. Keep track of who's on what side, because it's not Republicans and Democrats, really. Because the Republicans, when they get in power, do very much of what the Democrats do, at least on foreign policy. So just keep an eye on that. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Go follow me on all my other accounts on Instagram, X, and Spotify. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Have a good day.
Americanism, not globalism.
I am not a slave. I am a free citizen.
There should be no Federal Reserve System.
Only America first.